Hi, I'm Kate. I grew up at Hill Country and I'm now based in Atlanta doing my PhD in sociology. But because of the coronavirus, I'm here for this semester, so I'm excited to be here with you guys and talk today. So I actually gave this same talk for the Biblical Womanhood series several years ago, and over the past couple of weeks, I've been looking back over my notes, and when I originally gave the talk, I started out with this question. I asked, have you ever felt that you've been subtly sabotaged? And then I gave a personal example of how I felt subtly sabotaged at one point, and then I made this statement to segue into the talk. I said, there are voices in our culture that are advocating for us, but might actually be subtly sabotaging and undermining us. So I was looking back over those notes, and I just thought, this is ridiculous. Like, I don't need to convince anybody that they're being sabotaged. We all know that. We know that we're being lied to all the time by everyone. We know the politicians are lying to us. We know the pharmaceutical companies are lying to us. We know the news media is lying to us. We know we can't trust what we see on social media. We know that pretty much everybody is looking for money or power or some kind of political agenda. It's no secret that people are trying to sabotage us all the time. But despite that, I do think it's worth thinking about and talking about the fact that the most influential and deceptive lies are often the lies that actually contain some truth. It's the lies that take something that's true and that's good and corrupts it. And not enough that we notice it, but just enough that we'll still take it in and swallow it whole. And even as it's poisoning us and devouring us from the inside out, we're still convinced that we've eaten something good. And we even try to give it to other people as well, thinking that this is a good thing. So today we're going to be talking about the feminist movement, which on the one hand has been an amazing advocate for women's rights and equality, which is a good, true thing. But has it been corrupted? Is there something rotten about it that we're not really realizing and just swallowing it whole? So I'm going to go over a history of the feminist movement in the US. Then I'm going to talk about some of the core tenets of the feminist movement and think critically about some of the ways that these things can be true as well as perhaps undermining us. And then finally, I'll present an alternative to feminism that comes more from maybe how God thinks about it and God's design. So first, as a disclaimer, the feminist movement is vast and diverse, and this will necessarily be a simplification, and I'll make some generalizations, but it's still helpful to get a feel for the different waves of feminism throughout our history. And I'll specifically be talking about feminism in the modern United States, because that's what affects us the most. So feminism in the US can be broken down into four main stages, actually. The first wave happened in the late 19th to early 20th century, and it was focused primarily on women's rights in the political sphere. So many of you will be familiar with the suffragettes, people like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, and these were women who fought for women's right to vote, for women's equality under the law, for women's equality within marriage and in terms of property rights, and for women to be equal, fully participating citizens in our nation. And this particular first wave ended around 1919 when the 19th Amendment was passed, which gave women the right to vote in every state. So fast forward a little bit, and the second wave of feminism started around the 1960s and 70s. And some of you may have lived through this or may remember it. And in this wave, the debate was taken from the political realm into the personal realm. And women were encouraged to see aspects of their personal lives as deeply politicized and reflecting sexist power structures. So one of the famous feminists that really influenced the second wave was Simone de Beauvoir, who wrote The Second Sex in 1949. This was a big precursor of the second wave. And in her book, she argued that women in our society are seen as the second sex, and that this is the fault of the men. Another very influential feminist during this period was Betty Friedan, who wrote The Feminist Mystique. And in her book, she argued against what she criticized as this idealized image of women's role in the household, taking care of the house and home, and having this role as only a wife and a mother. And she said that this does not give women happiness or fulfillment, that actually it's oppressing women. During this time, there was also the sexual revolution that was going on, and feminism had a big role to play in that as well. So during the sexual revolution, people were kind of throwing off some of the constraints or chains that bound them to traditional views about sexuality, who you can have sex with and when and what's appropriate. And feminists said that men historically have been able to freely have sex with whoever they want and didn't have some of the constraints that women have had. And feminists argued that women, in order to be equal and in order to be liberated, need to also have this same sexual freedom. And contraception was a big aspect of that. So there was a big push for equal access to contraception for all women, and especially abortion as well. Many of you will remember Gloria Steinem, who was one of the most influential advocates for contraception and abortion. So then following the second wave, or kind of in the middle of that in the 1970s and 80s, we saw the feminist sex wars. This was a huge clash between the anti-pornography feminists, who said that porn and any type of sexually objectifying women is a negative thing and it's anti-feminist. And then the pro-sex feminists, who said that sex is empowering. And this big debate ushered in what we now know as the third wave, which began largely in the 1990s. And the third wave is kind of all over the place. There are lots of different strands and different emphases. But one of the biggest themes in the third wave was a focus on sexuality as a source of women's empowerment. So if women can be sexually free and sexually promiscuous and express their sexuality openly in terms of how they dress and the things that they say and what they do, that this is a form of actually taking back their power from the men. Our sexuality can be used as a weapon in defense of our own rights. And during this time, we also saw a big reclaiming of some derogatory terms that were traditionally used to describe women. And we hear that still today in different songs and in the movies. Previous derogatory terms we now even call each other, and it's funny or it's empowering. With this as well, there was a recasting of the debate about contraception and abortion in terms of women's rights. So it's now women's right to choose, women's right to control their own bodies, and that's why women should have contraception and should have access to abortion. During this wave, there was also a big criticism of past waves of feminism that focused too much on white, heterosexual, cisgender women in middle-class homes. So during the third wave, the third wave feminists expanded their themes to include women of color and women from different backgrounds, sexual preferences, and different gender preferences. And this was to encompass more experiences of women and shed a light on different forms of oppression that women might feel depending on who they are. This was also, along with that theme, a time of deconstructing gender completely. Many of you will have heard in the popular media this idea that gender is a social construction, and third wave feminists talked about the idea that gender doesn't exist, that actually this is a social construct and all we have is biological sex, but these ideas of gender roles are really actually oppressing us. So these themes also fed into the fourth wave, and they're still really prominent today, but the fourth wave was especially focused on the use of social media to combat themes such as sexual harassment, rape, and violence against women, especially in the workplace. And this started around 2012, and the Me Too movement is one of the most iconic aspects of this particular wave of feminism. And the big emphasis was on the fact that despite all of these huge advances that we've made for women, despite the fact that we have equality under the law and we're in the workplace and we're advancing more than we ever have throughout history, there are still huge inequalities that happen, especially in terms of abuse against women and sexual abuse. And we were all really, I think, devastated and shocked to see how many women came forward during the beginning stages of the Me Too movement to say, yes, me as well, I've experienced some kind of sexual harassment or sexual violence in some way, shape, or form, and this has also affected me. So clearly, the feminist movement throughout the past 100 years has been very diverse, it's very vast, and it's not a monolith. Feminists disagree with each other. We talked about the feminist sex wars, where they were arguing about what really is feminist and what role does sex play in that. So not all feminists agree, but there are still some main tenets that most feminists would actually hold on to. And along with that, depending on your particular age or background, as I've been talking about all of these things, you might have different associations with different waves, and you might have a different view, whether positive or negative, towards the feminist movement. And I would say at this point, culturally, I think especially for the younger generations, any debate about whether feminism is good or bad is pretty much over. At this point, our culture says that we are all, or we all should be feminists. So there was an interview of Kristen Stewart, who is the main actress in the Twilight series, and she was asked about her reaction to women that reject feminism. Her response was, "That's such a strange thing to say, isn't it? Like, what do you mean? Do you not believe in equality for men and women?" And of course we do. Of course we do. We all believe in this equality for men and women. And the reason that we do is because there is truth to the argument that feminists have been making since the beginning, that actually women have been subordinate to men throughout history. If you think about it, we've only had the right to vote for the past 100 years, which in the scheme of world history is wild. That's very recent. Women have been subordinate to men physically, financially, emotionally in many ways, and treated as less than, inferior, weak, less intelligent, as some kind of corrupt temptation. And even after women have achieved equal legal status to men in many countries in the world, we still face all kinds of different discrimination and violence and abuse. So of course we're all feminists, and of course the feminist movement has actually really come a long way and brought us to where we are. But I wonder, are there aspects of feminism that are actually rotten, that have been corrupted and are now undermining us, and we're just still swallowing it whole? So I want to think about that as I go through some of these core tenets of feminist thinking that pretty much anyone that identifies as a feminist would say that they subscribe to. So first, sameness must replace stereotypes is a core aspect of feminist thought. And this was especially prominent in the second wave, where there was a huge rejection of traditional masculine and feminine gender roles. People said, we don't need any more gender roles. This is unfair. In order to be equal to men, feminists said that we need to be the same as men. So we need to get rid of these differences. And we saw this in the push towards gender-neutral parenting. We shouldn't give our girls Barbie dolls and dress them in dresses and bows, and we shouldn't give our boys trucks and encourage them to do traditional boy things. We should let them express themselves however they want, and we should not socialize them into these roles. And there's this big underlying assumption here that sameness equals inequality. Sameness equals equality, and difference equals inequality. This theme was further carried on in the third wave of feminism, where we deconstructed gender completely and said that not only are gender roles bad, but they're a lie. These are purely social constructions that we've made up, and we actually don't have a core essence or wiring as men and women. Masculinity and femininity doesn't exist. Beyond our biological sex, these things are total social constructions. And if we could just realize that, then we'll be free and we can express our gender however we want, and we'll be less oppressed. Now, I'm doing my PhD in sociology, so I am very deep in the world of the social construction of reality. And I will say, just like I said at the beginning, the most deceptive lies often have some truth to it. So when we're thinking about the social construction of gender, I think we could all agree that there is nothing inherently feminine about the color pink, for example, or some of the trappings that go along with what we think of as boy stuff or girl stuff. This is socially constructed. Our culture changes all the time in terms of our fashion, in terms of the things that we like and want to do. There are things that we classify as girly or more for boys that don't necessarily have to be. That is a fair thing to say, and that's interesting to study, and it's interesting to look at how some of the things that our culture comes up with does oppress us in different ways. That is a different claim from saying what the psychologists and scientists know to be true, which is that men and women are different biologically, physiologically, neurologically, hormonally, as we are all far too familiar with, and dispositionally as well. Men and women are different. And is it possible that these differences could be a good thing? I just wonder, don't women have something positive to offer that men don't as much? Is it possible that some of the traditionally feminine characteristics, such as being relational, emotionally aware, warm, nurturing, and compassionate, especially with everything that's going on right now, aren't these things that the world desperately needs? And when you really think about this claim that sameness will give us equality, that sameness should replace stereotypes, there is an inherent contradiction there. And that contradiction is that when feminists are saying this, they're not saying that men and women should all be the same and kind of come down to this neutral ground. They're saying that we need to be the same as the men. We need to have the same roles that the men have had. We need to have the same characteristics that the men hold. We need to be assertive, dominant, aggressive, competent, and all these things that have been traditionally associated with men. And I've wondered as I've thought about this topic, why is it that feminists and many of us want to have these traditionally male qualities rather than lifting up some of the amazing female qualities? And I think that the answer is that these qualities achieve power and money. And we've seen throughout history that men predominantly have held those two things. The Bible tells us that those are not the things that we should be striving for. And actually, many of these feminine qualities are some of the most important aspects of what Jesus showed us is what it's like to be a full human. Second core tenet of feminism: independence must replace dependence. So the idea is we need to not be dependent on men. We need to be totally independent, strong women. I have to admit, this one really, really gets to me. I really like this. I think of myself as very independent, and there's some truth to this idea. Independence is a good thing, especially given the fact that throughout history we have been dependent on men in a negative way. We've been financially dependent on them, politically dependent on them, and that's been a problem for us. And so shouldn't we say that we are not at all dependent on them anymore? I want to read you some lyrics from a Destiny's Child song. This was in the Charlie's Angels movie from several years ago, but it's called Independent Women. It says, question, tell me what you think about me. I buy my own diamonds and I buy my own rings. Only ring your celly when I'm feeling lonely. When it's all over, please get up and leave. Question, tell me how you feel about this. Try to control me, boy, you get dismissed. Pay my own fun, oh, and I pay my own bills. Always 50-50 in relationships. The shoes on my feet, I bought it. The clothes I'm wearing, I bought it. The rock I'm rocking, I bought it. Because I depend on me if I want it. So I really like that song. I remember hearing it as a kid, and I was like, yes, she is financially independent. She is strong, she has a career, she's intelligent, she's sexy, she doesn't depend on men. I really like that. You probably like it too, especially given the history of our dependence on men. But is this idea, when we really think about it, actually helping us? So I was thinking about this song, and if we flip it to the other side and think about when men are like what this song is describing, when all they care about is work and money, when they don't care about you unless they want to use you for sexual gratification. Then when they're done, they want you to leave. Like, what do we think about men? We think they're sexist, disgusting pigs. It's not cool. We don't like that. But this feminist theme is telling us that we should be independent from them in the same way that they are from us, and that we, instead of calling them to a higher level, should sink down to their level in the name of claiming our rights and equality. So is independence something that we should really be striving for? Do we really not need men? There's a famous feminist, Germaine Greer, who said she completely rejects socially sanctioned relationships like marriage because they limit individual autonomy and personal fulfillment. She says such institutions should be renounced or minimized because they lead to entanglements. So while it's true that men obviously cannot fulfill us, many of us have tried that, and we know that it's not the case. Only God can do that. And it's good that we're not dependent on men in the same way that we have been in the past in a harmful way. Is it true that we actually don't need relationships with men at all, and they have nothing to offer us? Instead, I would suggest that God has designed us in such a way that men and women need each other. We have something to offer each other. And actually, this idea that we need to be totally independent from men and reject men might be undermining God's design for how we can live together. The third core tenet of feminism is that sexual liberation must replace sexual restraint. This idea of sexual liberation and a woman's right to control her own body and to be sexually promiscuous is really core to feminist thought. And in this area as well, there has been a lot of inequity between men and women when it comes to sex. When a man and a woman has sex, there's only one person that's at risk of getting pregnant. And if she does get pregnant, historically there's been only one person that's primarily responsible for taking care of that child. Additionally, women have traditionally suffered more from sexual encounters emotionally. And it's been unfair. So according to the feminist, we should level that playing field by using contraception to be just as sexually promiscuous as the men. And we need to have the right to abortion, and we need to have equal access to contraception so that we can do that. In the 1960s and 70s, there was a huge push towards this sexual freedom in the sexual revolution. And as time went on and people began to see some of the ramifications of this in terms of not only the emotional scarring, but also physical consequences of pregnancies, abortions, STDs that lead to cancer and other physical problems, there was a movement towards abstinence, with some young people saying, actually, maybe sexual purity is more of a benefit to us. The feminist response to this is really interesting. I'm going to read you a quote from Karen DeCrow, who is a former president of the National Organization for Women. She chided younger college-age women for their return to what she called a new puritanicalism. She said the cult of female virginity and purity is part of the second-class citizenship for women. So, sexual promiscuity equals first-class citizenship, like the men, and being pure sexually equals second-class citizenship. Okay, got it. So then, with the third wave, we see even a more extreme acceptance of this idea of sexual liberation, and we see that we should take our sexuality and use it and show it off because this gives us power. It makes us strong, and it's a weapon that we can use to take back our power from the men. And this is something, especially for the younger generations, you will know that saturates our culture. We hear messages like this in almost every song on the radio, in all of the TV shows, in movies, everywhere we go. And we even sometimes say things that kind of buy into this narrative. And if you think about it, it's like so smart. Like, we should totally have lots of sex and show off our bodies all the time, and then we should kill our babies so that we can be just as sexually degraded as the men have been for the past few thousand of years. This clearly riles me up, because when you think about it, who is this benefiting? The men. So we're gonna watch a clip from a couple of comedians, some of you might know them, Key and Peele, where they're making fun of this topic. And a point that I wanna make is this is such an obvious and obnoxious thing that's happening that for anyone that's paying attention, they know that it's going on, to the extent that these two male comedians are mocking the fact that we buy into this. Let's watch.
Hey, what up, y'all? Welcome back to HCL. We are in Hollywood. I got the answers, and the answers this morning is Mother Majesty. Thank you for being here, Mother Majesty.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Now, before the break, we heard your song, She Nomenon, from the new hit album, Girl Army.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, Scratch. You know, this whole album is about girls and empowering girls and, you know, kind of just showing girls that they can be strong and powerful and do what they want to do and not what the media says they need to do.
All right, that's deep. That's deep. Now, we got some young females here who have some questions for you. Is that okay?
Oh, it's always okay. It's always okay. I always want to hear from my girl army.
Hi, Majesty. It is so cool to meet you.
Thank you so much. I think you're beautiful just like that.
Yeah, so, okay, last week I took your advice from your song Get Some, and I flaunted it till he wanted it. But I ended up losing my virginity to a guy that I don't know.
You see, it is time for girls to take back their power nowadays because it's your body and it's your mind, and you should use that to feel sexy and empowered.
Okay, yeah, but now I'm pregnant.
Miracles. Next question.
Hi, Majesty. I'm Cassie. I think your album rocks.
Thank you so much, Cassie. I think you should never change your skin.
Okay. So, in your song Friday Night Freakdown,
Thank you so much, Cassie.
you say, bend it over, touch the ground, he'll ride you like his merry-go-round.
What it's about, Cassie, is us reclaiming our bodies as women because, you know, for a long time, being sexy was about being sexy for a man. But this is about being sexy for yourself.
Woo! But I've got herpes.
Okay, let's change tracks for a second. We gonna go to commercial. When we come back, Mother Majesty is going to unfurl her new song. What is it about?
Oh, okay. It's kind of a love song, and it's about finding strength after having your heart broken.
All right, we're gonna go to commercial. When we come back, Mother Majesty with Who Got Next on this Blackberry Pie?
Here's your dressing room, Your Majesty.
Thank you so much.
That's right, girls. Being overly sexual and being strong are the same thing. It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Girl power!
I'm teaching a class for undergraduates in social psychology, and the topic this week is on attraction and relationships and how these develop from a social psychological perspective. So I've been putting together this lecture on modern relationships and some of the dynamics that have changed over time, and I found this Vanity Fair article from 2015 where the journalist interviews young people in their 20s in New York, and she was specifically asking about the dating scene and how social media and how online dating has affected this. And I want to read you some of the quotes from these young people. Alex, an investment banker in his early 20s in New York, said, "You're always sort of prowling. You could talk to 2 or 3 girls at a bar and pick the best one. Or you can swipe a couple hundred people a day. The sample size is so much larger. It's setting up 2 or 3 Tinder dates a week, and chances are sleeping with all of them. So you could rack up 100 girls you've slept with in a year. Sex is so easy now." Dan, another investment banker, said, "It's like ordering Uber Eats, but you're ordering a person." Then Amanda, a college senior, says, "There is no dating. There's no relationships. They're rare. You can have a fling that lasts 7, 8 months, and you can never actually call someone your boyfriend. Hooking up is a lot easier. No one gets hurt. Well, not on the surface. And then finally, a 20-year-old woman in New York said, "I call it the dating apocalypse." Do you feel empowered? I feel depressed. Okay, final tenet. Having a career must replace the family as a woman's primary pursuit in life. Now, first, let's talk about some of the truth behind this statement. In the past, women had limitations in terms of educational opportunities, in terms of industries they could go into, or if they could be in the workplace at all. And then once women were able to go into the workplace, there have been limitations on how far they could advance, especially in certain industries. And women certainly should have equality under the law. Women should not be limited in their opportunities in comparison to men, and shouldn't face discrimination based on their sex in the workplace. I firmly believe all of those things. But snuck in there with all of that truth is this idea that a career should be a woman's main thing, and that having a career and prioritizing a career is the thing that provides women and men, apparently, value, fulfillment, worth, power, independence. And if women choose not to have a career and choose something else instead, then they are oppressed. They've internalized the patriarchy. And they're just backwards. I want to watch this clip from Mona Lisa's Smile, which is a movie from several years ago in which Julia Roberts is a new professor at a very prestigious all-girls university in 1953. And her goal in coming to this school is to try to challenge these girls to be awakened to some of the oppression that they're experiencing in terms of the expectations of the roles they're supposed to play in the house and home. So let's watch her as she tries to get through to these girls.
Thank you. Slide. Contemporary art.
No, that's just an advertisement.
Quiet. Today you just listen. What will the future scholars see when they study us? A portrait of women today? There you are, ladies. The perfect likeness of a Wellesley graduate, magna cum laude, doing exactly what she was trained to do. Slide. A Rhodes Scholar. I wonder if she recites Chaucer while she presses her husband's shirts. Slide. Now you physics majors can calculate the mass and volume of every meatloaf you make. Slide. A girdle to set you free. What does that mean? What does that mean? What does it mean? I give up. You win. The smartest women in the country. I didn't realize that by demanding excellence, I would be challenging. What did it say? What did it say? The roles you were born to fill. Is that right? The roles you were born to fill? It's my mistake. Class dismissed.
What a waste, right? What a waste for these women to be at home making meatloaf and ironing for their husbands. Being a wife and mother is a totally waste of your potential, of your intelligence, of anything that you could do in your life. To be really liberated, you need to be out in the workplace, fulfilling your potential and doing all of these things. An interesting thing about this is that this idea that careers should be the primary pursuit of life it's not just trying to level the playing field between men and women. It's saying there is a certain way to be equal. There's a right way to be equal, which means having a career, and if you don't choose that, you're doing it wrong, even if that's not what you want to do. Simone de Beauvoir, a very influential feminist, said, "No woman should be authorized to stay at home to raise her children. Society should be totally different. Women should not have that choice, precisely because if there is such a choice, too many women will make that one." I don't know about you, but to me, that sounds oppressive. Let's watch this follow-up conversation between Julia Roberts and one of her students.
It was my choice not to go. He would have supported it.
But you don't have to choose.
No, I have to. I want a home, I want a family. That's not something I'll sacrifice.
No one's asking you to sacrifice that, Joan. I just want you to understand that you can do both.
Do you think I'll wake up one morning and regret not being a lawyer?
Yes, I'm afraid that you will.
Not as much as I regret not having a family, not being there to raise them. I know exactly what I'm doing, and it doesn't make me any less smart. This must seem terrible to you.
I didn't say that.
Sure you did. You always do. You stand in class and tell us to look beyond the image, but you don't. To you, a housewife is someone who sold her soul for a Center Hall colonial. She has no depth, no intellect, no interests. You're the one who said I could do anything I wanted. This is what I want.
Congratulations. Be happy.
Having equal rights and having equality with men doesn't mean that we have to live our lives a certain way. We have the freedom to choose, and that's what it should all be about. And importantly, we should be making our choices in the light of what God is calling us to. And that's going to be different for each one of us. So I want to close with presenting just some alternatives to feminism, some ideas that I want to throw out there that will be explored later on in this series throughout the year. Just thinking about what does God potentially say about this stuff. And the first thing I want to talk about is the idea of design. So the Bible says that actually there is a design for men and women, in contrast to the feminists and many others in our culture that say that gender is a social construct. The Bible says that society doesn't construct gender. We don't construct gender. God constructed gender. He designed it. And of course, there's individual variation within both genders, but God actually designed us in a special way. And his design, the more we look at it and understand what it's supposed to be and don't pay attention to what our culture is saying the design is, I actually think that it's not oppressive and it's not limiting, but it gives us meaning and purpose and freedom. The second point I want to talk about is an idea of interdependence. So feminism, I think, has created a false dichotomy that we're either dependent on men in this really negative, subordinate way, or we're independent from men in the sense that we don't need them at all, we reject any ties with them, and we express our independence in all these ways that we've talked about. I think there's actually a third option, and that is that men and women are actually dependent on each other. We complement each other, we need each other, and I believe that God has designed us in such a way that we bring something to the table that is necessary and unique that the other really needs. And in this model, in God's model, there isn't just dignity and respect for the men. There's huge dignity and respect for the women as well. And I don't know that we're seeing that in the current state of feminist thought, dignity and respect for women. Finally, I would say that Jesus flips this entire conversation on its head. So, where is it in the Bible when Jesus came to the Pharisees with his list of demands about his rights? Oh yeah, he never did that. Jesus never claimed to have the rights. He never fought for the rights that were duly afforded to him because he was literally God. He actually did the exact opposite, laid down every right and surrendered his life in the most excruciating and humiliating way that we've seen in history. That's more radical than radical feminism. I want to read you a verse from Philippians that many of you will know well. Paul said, "Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God as something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the form of a servant, being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross." I think while we're having this big debate and this war with men over here, Jesus is over here being like, what are you guys talking about? If we actually look at how Jesus lived and what he says, he calls us to focus on other people and to lay down our rights and take up our cross and follow him. As Christians, we know what humanity was supposed to look like. It doesn't look like a war between men and women. It looks like following Jesus and becoming who he's called us to be. Okay, I'm gonna pray for us and then you can break into your groups and discuss. God, thank you so much that you know who we are. You created us to be exactly what you want us to be. And this tension that many of us feel, being pulled in so many different ways from different messages in our culture that sometimes have truth to them, but also have really corrupting lies. Thank you that we can look to your word to find out what you really say about us, and that your plan for us is so much more freeing and liberating and empowering than anything that we're hearing in our society. I pray that you will help us to have critical minds as we take in what we hear our culture saying and help us to process everything in light of your word and who you are. In Jesus' name, amen.